I need to tell you about something that happened to me when I was 15. Something that still keeps me awake at night, even 10 years later. My name is Jake, and back then, I lived with my parents in a small house on Maple Street. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew each other, where kids rode their bikes until dark, and where nothing bad ever happened. Our house was nothing special, just a 2-story home with white siding and a small front porch. But there was one thing that always creeped me out about it: the basement door. Most houses have their basement access inside, but ours had an old wooden door that opened directly to the outside. Dad always said it was built that way back in the 1950s for easy coal delivery. The door was heavy, painted green, and secured with a thick deadbolt that we never used because nothing valuable was down there. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Dad was in his usual spot on the couch, remote in hand, flipping through the evening news. Mom was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. I was sprawled on the carpet doing homework, half listening to the TV when something made my blood run cold. "Breaking news tonight," the anchor said, her voice serious. "Authorities are searching for Marcus Webb, a convicted murderer who escaped from Riverside Correctional Facility earlier today. Webb, 34, was serving a life sentence for the brutal murders of 3 family members in their home in 2018. The screen showed a mugshot, a man with dead eyes, greasy hair, and a scar running down his left cheek. Dad turned up the volume. "Webb is considered extremely dangerous and should not be approached. He was last seen wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, but may have changed clothes. Police believe he's still in the area and warn residents to lock their doors and report any suspicious activity immediately." "Jesus," Dad muttered, reaching for his phone. "That's only 20 miles from here." Mom poked her head out from the kitchen, dish towel in her hands. "What's going on?" "Some psycho broke out of prison," Dad said, his voice tight. "We need to make sure everything's locked up tight tonight." I felt a chill run down my spine as I stared at the man's photo on the screen. There was something about his eyes. They looked hungry, like a wild animal. The reporter continued talking about his escape, how he'd overpowered a guard during a medical transport. But I wasn't really listening anymore. All I could think about was that basement door. The next few days passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound louder. Mom and Dad tried to act normal, but I could see the way Dad checked the locks twice before bed, and how Mom kept glancing out the windows. On Friday night, I was in my room playing video games when I heard it. A soft scraping sound coming from somewhere below. I paused the game and listened. There it was again, like something being dragged across concrete. My room was directly above the basement, and sometimes you could hear Dad moving stuff around down there. But Dad was in the living room watching TV. I crept to my bedroom door and listened. I could hear the TV downstairs, Dad's occasional cough, Mom washing dishes. So what was that noise? I grabbed a flashlight from my desk drawer and tiptoed downstairs. The basement door inside the house was closed, just like always. I pressed my ear against it but heard nothing. Maybe I'd imagined it. Saturday morning, Mom was doing laundry in the basement when she came upstairs looking puzzled. "That's strange," she said to Dad over coffee. "Some of the boxes down there have been moved around. Did you go down there yesterday?" Dad shook his head. "Haven't been down there all week. Maybe they shifted when you were doing laundry?" Mom frowned. "I don't think so. The big box of Christmas decorations was in the middle of the floor, and I know I left it against the wall." I felt that familiar chill again. "Mom, what else was moved?" "Oh, just some old furniture. Probably nothing." But her voice didn't sound convinced. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face from the news. Marcus Webb. Was he still out there? Had they caught him? I realized I hadn't been keeping up with the news. Around 2 a.m., I heard something that made my heart stop. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the basement. I lay frozen in my bed, straining to listen, like someone trying to be quiet but not quite managing it. I wanted to call out for Dad, but my voice wouldn't work. What if it wasn't Dad? What if someone was in our basement? The footsteps stopped. The house went completely silent, except for the sound of my heart hammering in my chest. I waited for what felt like hours, but heard nothing more. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I fell into a restless sleep. Sunday morning, I asked Dad if he'd been in the basement during the night. "No, son." "Why?" "I thought I heard something." Dad gave me a long look. "This whole prison break thing has you spooked, doesn't it? Don't worry, they'll catch him soon. Guys like that don't stay free for long." But they hadn't caught him. I checked the news that afternoon, and Marcus Webb was still on the loose. The police had found some of his clothing near a river about 15 miles away, but no other trace of him. That's when I started to wonder, what if he hadn't run away? What if he was hiding somewhere close by, waiting for the search to die down? And what if that somewhere was our basement? Monday morning brought news that made my worst fears seem possible. Dad was watching the morning news when the reporter announced that Webb had been spotted near residential areas, possibly seeking shelter in basements, garages, or abandoned buildings. "Residents are advised to check their properties thoroughly," the reporter said. "Webb is skilled at hiding and may have been living in crawl spaces or storage areas without detection." I looked at Dad, my eyes wide. "We need to check our basement." Dad nodded grimly. "Yeah, we do, but not alone. I'm calling the police." The officers who came were thorough but found nothing obvious. They checked every corner, every hiding spot, but the basement looked normal. One of the cops, a young guy with kind eyes, pulled me aside. "Your dad mentioned you've been hearing things at night. That's completely normal. When we're scared, our minds can play tricks on us. But if you hear anything else, don't hesitate to call, okay?" I nodded, feeling slightly foolish. Maybe I had been imagining things. But that night, the sounds came, back stronger than ever. Not just footsteps this time. I heard what sounded like someone moving furniture, soft thuds, and once, what I could have sworn was a cough. A human cough. I crept to my parents' room and woke Dad up. "Dad," I whispered. "He's down there. I know he's down there." Dad sat up, instantly alert. "What did you hear?" "Footsteps, moving sounds, and I think someone coughed." This time, Dad didn't hesitate. He grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and we went downstairs together. He flicked on every light and we stood at the basement door, listening. Silence. Dad slowly opened the door and called down. "Hello? Anyone down there? This is private property." Nothing. We went down together, Dad going first with the bat raised. The basement looked exactly the same as it had during the day. No signs of disturbance, no evidence anyone had been there. But as we turned to go back upstairs, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The outside basement door, the green one that led to the backyard, had fresh scratch marks around the lock. Deep gouges in the wood, like someone had been trying to pick it or force it open. "Dad," I whispered, pointing. His face went pale. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, then quickly apologized for the language. "We're calling the police again. Right. Now." This time, the cops took us more seriously. They found footprints in the soft dirt outside the basement door. Fresh ones that hadn't been there during their earlier visit. Size 11 boots, they said. They also found what looked like makeshift tools nearby, a bent coat hanger and a screwdriver, both probably stolen from someone's garage. "He's definitely been here," the sergeant told us, "probably trying to break in for shelter. We're going to post a patrol car on your street tonight, and I want you to call immediately if you hear anything. Don't investigate on your own." The patrol car was reassuring, but I still couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house settling made me jump. Around 3 a.m. I heard my parents talking in hushed voices downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs to listen. "Maybe we should go to your sister's place until they catch him," Mom was saying. "We can't live in fear, Linda. Besides, he's probably moved on by now. Why would he stick around when he knows we're watching for him?" But Dad was wrong, dead wrong. Tuesday was the day everything went to hell. Dad had a business trip that couldn't be postponed, and Mom had promised to help her elderly aunt who'd fallen and broken her hip. They'd be gone overnight. "I don't like leaving Jake alone," Mom said as they packed. "He'll be fine," Dad replied. but I could see the worry in his eyes. The police are watching the house, and Jake's mature for his age. Besides, Webb's probably in Mexico by now. They made me promise to keep my phone charged, keep the doors locked, and call 911 at the first sign of trouble. The patrol car would drive by every hour, they said. Everything would be fine. It wasn't fine. It wasn't fine at all. I tried to stay brave after my parents left, but as darkness fell, the fear crept back in. I made sure every door and window was locked, turned on all the outside lights, and settled in the living room with my phone within arm's reach. The patrol car had driven by twice, its spotlight sweeping across our yard each time. Around 10 p.m. I was watching TV when I heard it, a sound that made my blood freeze. A slow, rhythmic knocking coming from the basement. Not the inside basement door, but from outside. Someone was knocking on the green door that led to the backyard. Knock. 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 I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and crept toward the kitchen window that looked out over the backyard. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but the knocking continued. Slow and patient, like whoever was out there had all the time in the world. I dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? This is Jake Morrison on Maple Street, I whispered. The escaped prisoner, Marcus Webb. I think he's trying to break into my basement. Someone's knocking on our outside basement door. Are you alone in the house? Yes. My parents are out of town. There's supposed to be a patrol car watching our street. I'm dispatching units now. Stay on the line with me and get to a safe room. Lock yourself in and don't come out until officers arrive. I ran upstairs to my parents' bedroom and locked the door. From their window, I could see part of the backyard, but the basement door was hidden by the angle of the house. The knocking had stopped. The knocking stopped, I told the dispatcher. Units are 2 minutes away. Stay where you are. That's when I heard it, the sound that still haunts my nightmares. The old basement door was opening. That distinctive creak of rusted hinges that I'd heard 1,000 times when Dad went down there. But Dad wasn't here. He's inside, I whispered into the phone. He got the door open. He's in my basement. Officers are pulling up now. Stay hidden. I could hear them downstairs. Heavy footsteps moving through the basement, then the internal basement door opening. He was in my house. Marcus Webb, the man who'd killed 3 people, was inside my house. I heard the front door burst open and officers shouting, "Police! Come out with your hands up!" What happened next was chaos. Shouting, running footsteps, something crashing over. I stayed locked in that bedroom, clutching my phone until a police officer knocked on the door and identified himself. When I finally came downstairs, I saw him. Marcus Webb, hands cuffed behind his back, being led out in handcuffs. He looked exactly like his mugshot, but worse, dirty, desperate, with wild eyes that seemed to look right through you. As they walked him past the living room, he turned and looked directly at me. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been caught, but wasn't sorry. Someone who would do it all again if given the chance. "You okay, son?" one of the officers asked me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "He'd been living in your basement for almost a week," the officer explained. "Made himself a little hideout behind the furnace. Been coming and going through that outside door. You're lucky you called when you did. We found some things down there that suggest he wasn't planning to stay hidden much longer." "What kind of things?" The officer's expression darkened. "Let's just say he'd been watching your family's routines. He knew when your parents would be gone. That was 10 years ago, but I still can't shake what happened that night. We moved out of that house within a month. Mom refused to stay there another day after learning Webb had been living in our basement, watching us, learning our habits. The worst part wasn't the break-in itself. It was learning that he'd been there all along, hiding just beneath our feet while we ate dinner, watched TV, slept in our beds. The police found evidence that he'd been coming upstairs when we weren't home, going through our things, probably planning what he'd do when he got his chance. Marcus Webb went back to prison, but not before his lawyer made sure everyone knew he'd never technically broken into our house. He claimed the basement door was already unlocked. It wasn't, but mud had washed away most of the evidence of forced entry. He plea bargained down to trespassing and parole violation. He served an extra 2 years. He's out now. I know, because I check the offender registry every few months. He lives about 50 miles from my current apartment, but that doesn't make me feel any safer. Sometimes I wonder if he remembers me. Remembers that night when I was just a scared, 15-year-old kid who had no idea how close I'd come to becoming his next victim. I still can't sleep in complete darkness. I check locks obsessively, and I'll never ever live in a house with an outside basement door. Because here's the thing that really keeps me awake at night. When they searched our basement after his arrest, they found more than just evidence he'd been living there. They found photographs, dozens of them, taken with a cheap camera. Pictures of our house from different angles, pictures of our cars, pictures of me walking to school, and pictures of other houses, other families, with notes written on the back, in his handwriting, detailing routines, schedules, when people came and went. The police said I was probably his first intended victim since his escape. That my call that night likely saved not just my life, but the lives of other families he'd been watching. They found his whole sick plan laid out in a notebook. How he'd break in, what he'd do, how long he'd stay. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder, what if I wasn't his first? What if there were other houses, other basements, other families who never knew he was there? What if that smile he gave me as they led him away wasn't the smile of someone who'd been caught, but someone who'd already gotten what he came for? I try not to think about it, but the questions won't go away. Just like the memory of that slow, patient knocking on our basement door, and the sound of those footsteps moving through my house in the dark. Some nights, I still hear them.